Well, it is a great pleasure to welcome you once again to the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. Some of us met last night at our ice-breaking reception. I'm Mark Bellamy, the director of the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. And this is the seminar devoted to managing security resources. This seminar is an annual fixture at the Africa Center for Strategic Studies. And it reflects our firm conviction that the proper handling of resources and budgets is one of the most important leadership tasks in any military organization, and indeed in any governmental organization. And yet, too often, this critical task is omitted from the study of strategic leadership. Our hope is that this seminar will give you all a better understanding of resource management and its vital importance, and more importantly, that you all will have an opportunity not only to draw on the U.S. experience and U.S. expertise, but also share your own experiences and your own best practices with each other. I wish that successful resource management were merely a matter of listening to good lectures and taking good notes and applying the lessons learned. But unfortunately, it is not that simple. Managing resources also requires good political instincts and good policy sense, because politicians and policymakers are the ones who set priorities and make the final decisions about how resources, how much money you all have to work with. So you do not manage resources in a vacuum. You manage resources in a specific political and policy context. Now, for most states in Africa, the context is one of resource scarcity, chronic resource scarcity when it comes to the armed forces. I would be surprised if any of you in this room felt that your armed forces were getting all of the resources needed to get the job done that you are required to do. And if any of you feel that you are getting all of the resources you need, I would be very eager to hear about it. And I'm sure your colleagues would also be eager to hear about it. In the United States, the situation is a bit different. Let me give you a brief sense of the context for management of resources, defense resources, security resources in this country, since it might serve as interesting background or as an interesting contrast for the African case studies that you will be looking at. Some in the U.S. might argue that the military is not getting all of the resources it needs. But consider that the U.S. defense budget grew from $400 billion, that's $400,000 million in 2001, to $699 billion in 2010. Now that's a jump of $299 billion, or about 75% over 9 years. In other words, defense spending grew faster in the United States than did GDP growth. The United States is unique, or if not unique, at least very unusual, in that we have a legislative body that often tries to give to the armed forces more money each year than the Defense Department requests in its budgetary requests. And I know this may seem unbelievable or even fantastic to most European or African militaries, who have a hard time persuading their parliaments to fund them even at minimal levels. We sometimes have a hard time persuading Congress not to continue funding the armed forces, or continue funding at levels above what the Department of Defense has requested. Now, in one way, our defense budget is very much like defense budgets around the world, in that pay and benefits, and including generous health benefits and pensions or retirements, make up the largest part of the budget. That's not how it is perhaps popularly understood in the United States, where more newsworthy are operations or the purchase of equipment, but the reality is simply that personnel expenses are the largest part of our defense budget. Now, with our debt growing much faster than our economy, the U.S. faces serious decisions in the short term about spending reductions across the board. And there is a consensus, although it is not really a very firm, a very strong political consensus yet in this country, that there will have to be major cutbacks in defense spending over the next 10 years if we are to seriously address our overall budgetary deficit. And that these cutbacks will entail not only reductions in the benefits that we pay to service members, but also cutbacks on spending on operations and equipment. And that in turn will inevitably mean cutbacks in capabilities. This is where politics and policymaking enter the picture. No one wants to talk seriously about cutting back military capabilities. Politically, that's not a very popular argument. That is not a winning argument, whether you are a Republican in this country or a Democrat. But the inescapable reality is that there is no way that defense spending can be brought under control without adjusting our capabilities. And what does that mean? Well, it means rethinking our strategy. It means rethinking our objectives. It means setting new priorities. It means accepting that we cannot be everywhere at once and we cannot do everything. This will be a tough challenge for the United States, but it has to be done. I don't expect that you will see here the kind of tough, realistic, and painful rethinking that has gone on, for example, in the recent debate over defense spending in the UK. We just don't have the political will here in either political party to allow for that. And in any case, the United States is not yet at the point where drastic cutbacks of the kind that have been contemplated in the UK are necessary. Still, we have tough choices, very tough choices ahead, and it will be very interesting to see how our military, our political leadership, and the public shape this debate and eventually make decisions. One point I hope will come out in your discussion, and I hope it also comes out in the course of debate in this country, future debate in this country over our levels of defense spending. And that is that too much money can be as bad for national security as too little. It is possible for military organizations to become too big, to become obese. And when they become obese, they become lazy and slow and ineffective. And this is true of any organization, not just armed forces or military organizations. Too much money means you don't have to prioritize. It means you don't have to innovate. It means you can ignore or set aside problems that you would otherwise have to address. Being too big means that you take duplication and waste for granted. And it means a general loss of discipline, focus, agility, and effectiveness. So let me just leave you with that one thought. Leanness is a virtue, and I trust that this will be a subject of your discussions. It applies to all of us, as much to the United States as to Africa. The challenge that we face going forward is to build and sustain organizations that are lean, smart, strong, and quick. I know it's much easier said than done, but I'm sure that this very distinguished group gathered here over the next week will have some good ideas in this regard, and hopefully some good ideas to pass along. I want to wish you all well in your deliberations and in your discussions over the next week. I look forward to participating, I hope, in some of these discussions, and I certainly look forward to some of the conclusions that I hope you will reach here in your time with us at the Africa Center. Welcome again to Washington. Thank you.